Hello, everyone. My name is Leo, and I'm with Uplift, and we are interviewing tonight Skyler Sorensen. Skyler is someone we have been chasing. I've been chasing him in a platonic sense. I guess you could say I've been chasing Skyler for a while, trying to get this interview, and we are excited to talk to him tonight. I saw you, Skyler, for the first time on Midnight Mormons. The guy's out in California. You're able to be on their show, and I've got a friend, one of our admins with Uplift is Amanda, and she's my good friend, and she mentioned you and how we need to connect and talk, and so after listening to some of your story and seeing your book on Amazon, I haven't had a chance to buy it yet, but seeing your book and kind of getting a sense for who you are, I wanted to meet with you tonight and ask some follow-up questions to the stuff that I thought was interesting that you said during your interview with Midnight Mormons. So yeah, we're excited to have you. I'll have you introduce yourself and say hello and anything you want to share.
Okay, well, yeah, well, thank you for having me. I appreciate you reaching out and having me on. My name is Skyler Sorensen. I'm a gay member of the church in a mixed orientation marriage. My wife and I have been married for about 5 years now. We have two children. Our first child, Milo, he was born at 24 and a half weeks. He weighed 1 pound and 8 ounces, measured in at just shy of 12 inches. He lived in the NICU for about a month, where he went through a lot of procedures and was being, he was really strong. He was actually really healthy for a baby that small, but did unfortunately develop an infection and pass away. And that was in 2019. And after that, we dealt with some spouts of infertility and ended up doing IVF to get our daughter Remy here, who is about 1.5 years now. And we're living in Utah County. I am a video editor. And yeah, I like you mentioned, just wrote a book called Exclude Not Thyself, Thriving as a Covenant-Keeping Gay Latter-day Saint. And it's my attempt to, I guess, gather together all of the bits of information and things that I wish I would have known as someone in my situation growing up in the church, ways that people in my situation, how I believe they can be successful, be happy, and thrive as members of the church and keep their covenants while doing so.
Perfect. That's great. And that's why that's why you're here, is to help us to understand more. So, one of the things that I've learned over the years with our LGBTQ loved ones, family members and friends, is that we, as non-LGBTQ in the church, we need to learn how to listen. We can love from a distance, but that's not all that we need to be doing. We need to be listening. And I think all the voices in the LGBTQ community are important. And I think your voice I would say is a minority in that community. I don't even know if you consider yourself as part of the LGBTQ community, Skyler. I don't want to label you as such, but that I think your voice, whether or not you consider yourself part of that community or not, I think your voice is important, and it's just as important as other voices who share their feelings and thoughts from that community. So you do label yourself, just to be clear, as a gay member of the church. You don't mind holding that label of gay?
I do, yeah. I mean, I don't mind. I do use that label just interchangeably with same-sex attracted. They mean the same thing to me. It's not a core piece of who I am, but it is a piece of who I am, and just honestly a way to quickly describe my situation.
Okay, cool. Very good. So do you want to tell us about your background as much as you can, and then point us to the book as well, like stuff that you could say this is in the book, and that's fine, that we can point people to that, but maybe a summary of dating, growing up, when you first realized that you were gay, would be really interesting for everyone to hear.
Yeah, I'll try and condense this as much as I can, because obviously there's a lot to it. And I do my book. I don't have a lot of my story. It's not centered around my story. There are bits and pieces of it kind of throughout.
Hmm.
But I mean, started recognizing my attraction to other boys when I was in probably elementary school. Obviously, didn't fully grasp what that was or what that meant, and it was a gradual process of learning and accepting. And I kind of developed somewhat of a dual life where it was kind of the gay part of me, which I associated with pornography use because it was very intertwined in my mind. They were kind of one and the same. But I eventually started to recognize that I should probably tell somebody. It was not until my senior year of high school where I finally got up the courage to leave a note for my mom and hide it somewhere safe, and then text her and kind of hightail it out of there to my friend's house, where I opened up to him, and then kind of did the same thing where I was sitting right next to him, but I had to text him because I was so afraid to come out. But I did that and then went back to my parents' house and came out to my sister. So it was kind of a small circle of people: my parents, my sister, my friend, and then my bishop. And it was around the time that I was preparing to serve a mission. So it was kind of all wrapped up in that preparation. And throughout my mission, it was something that I told my mission presidents, but never any companions. I served my mission in Eugene, Oregon. Didn't really have an issue on the mission, anything significant. There was a time where the rumor that I'm gay spread throughout the mission, and that got back to me at the end of my mission. So that was disheartening, but nothing that was destructive to me, or that just was I guess crumpled me. After my mission, I went up to BYU to attend the film program there. I guess I should back up a little bit. In high school, I had one girlfriend for about 2 weeks, and I just didn't feel ready, and so I ended it. But other than that, didn't really date anyone, or I think not purposely, but I'm sure I was flirtatious with other girls, but I just kind of saw it as being friendly. So I didn't have I guess, quote unquote, real girlfriend until my wife. We met in college. We were living in the same dorm. Her roommates and friend group were friends with my roommates, and we just all hung out all the time. I really liked Amanda. I liked being around her. I liked who she was. I actually didn't feel ready to date when I asked her. It was kind of a leap of faith a little bit. But it was what I needed to assure myself that I could do this and that I was ready. And so we dated for about a year, got engaged in, I shouldn't have even, I'm not the timeline, I'm not the historian in the relationship, so I always
Me
forget.
either.
But
Sorry.
in March, we got married in March of 2018. And so we were engaged October 2017. That's what it was. And yeah, married in the Provo City Center Temple. And that was about 5 years ago. So that's a summary of dating.
Yeah. So never any dates with men?
No, I never experienced anything like that. That was kind of out of the realm of possibilities for me in my mind. And not really something that I really desired to do, because growing up, I always had a vision in my mind of my future, and it always included a wife and children of our own. Despite my attraction to the same sex, that was at some points in my life something I tried to oppress, which wasn't healthy. But even then and now, my vision and my future and what I wanted ultimately was a wife. And so I just never really went down that path.
This is not in your list of questions, but did anybody when you were younger that knew of your attraction pressure you to uh, identify as gay and just accept that you are fully attracted to men and that there would be no attraction to women in your life? Anybody that was like encouraging you not to belong to a church that affirms heterosexual marriage, anything like that, like any influences that would push you that direction, or no?
Because those who I told, because it was such a small circle that I told initially, there wasn't really any room for that. The
Okay.
only time where something like that has happened was when I came out more publicly a few months after we were married.
Okay.
I had a few people reach out and just kind of passively tell me that I should live my truth, is what they would say.
Right.
And obviously, since then, being more vocal, I get a lot more of that now. But I know how to handle it now.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So like, would you say that did you ever fall in love with anybody, or like want to go out with a guy and just never pursued it? Or like, did you just lock your heart? Like they taught us on my mission, they said, lock your heart for 2 years. And I guess you've been locking your heart for a long time. Or did you ever feel like you wanted to date somebody, you just couldn't?
Yeah, obviously the pull was there. I mean, that's the nature of
Yeah.
attraction, is the pull was there. And I've had, crushes and things like that. I don't know if
Yeah.
I'd ever say full blown love or anything like that, but obviously the pull. But again, I mean, I've just been really blessed to have a really solid support system in my life, and I've always relied on that, and just my testimony of the gospel, and kind of the chain of logic of, if I believe these things to be true, what does that mean for me? Well, in my mind, that means I should do everything I can to live my covenants, and that's how I'll be the happiest. And so I mean, I've struggled with faith as anyone does, but that's kind of been my motivating factor.
Okay. Did you pray for your attractions to change? Have you prayed for that, or hoped for that at least?
Um, I don't think I ever prayed specifically for that to happen. I know
Okay.
I felt like the natural distress of having to reconcile a same-sex attraction with my faith in God. There's a lot of tension there, obviously.
Yeah.
I had really great therapists who helped me to categorize things and work through those feelings in a healthy way in order to reach my goals. Um, but yeah, I never specifically prayed for them to go away. Just expressed a lot of hurt and things to God, but
Yeah.
yeah, never asked for that.
Okay. Interesting. Cool. So here's the big question. I'm a survey guy. I like surveys, and and so the question is, from 0 to 10, how attracted are you to men? Like 10 being, you know, purely men. I don't want any, I don't want anything else. Or, all the way down to 0. Obviously you aren't 0, but and then like say like you're on a scale like from 0 to 10, like over time, when you were first feeling, from puberty, like you were feeling attracted to people. Did you feel like you were a 10 then, and then like over time you've found some attraction to women, and especially your wife? Like are you sexually attracted to her at this point, or you find other women attractive, or is it just like, how does that? What? Give me some numbers, some data here.
Sure. Yeah, so the reason that I refer to myself as exclusively gay or same-sex attracted is because without my religious convictions and understanding, 10 times out of 10 I would pursue a man. I don't feel traditional sexual attraction toward women in any way. We obviously sexuality is something that does kind of change throughout your life and how you experience it. And how I explain my attraction to my wife specifically is, from what I understand, it seems like my attraction to her mirrored that of what women experience, generally speaking, where my attraction to her sprung out of an emotional connection with her, to where I want to be emotionally vulnerable and intimate with her. And eventually that led to a desire to be intimate in the more traditional senses with her. And it's not like I said, it's not a traditional sexual attraction. It's not the same as it is with guys. But I feel it's just as fulfilling, like just as fulfilling for both of us, because it's centered on our love for each other, our commitment, and again, just a desire to express our love for each other. So it's a little bit unique. I recognize that. But we both feel fulfilled, and yeah, I mean, any more you want me to go into that?
I mean, that's good. I'm trying to think of how to like understand that, because it's heavy, like the messaging that we get quite a bit as members of the church or as Christians in general, that affirm a traditional heterosexual marriage is being ordained by God, right? Kind of those boundaries that God has set. The difficulty that we have, that are critics of the church and also people inside the church that struggle with this, is that being fulfilled, like being able to say, yes, I'm fulfilled, satisfied with my relationship, is that like, is that just partially fulfilled? Like, because the sexual part of a relationship, as is for many people, it's like, it's number one. Like it's mostly that, especially like the first year of marriage and the first 10, 15, and then it kind of becomes more relational. Like companionate love is, I guess, a term for a type of love. Like as you become, as you reach your 80s, you're like, hey, you're like, hey, hot mama. You're not a hot mama anymore, but you're still attracted, like in emotional ways, right? Like the relationship, the friendship, the companionship is a bigger facet or variable and a dynamic inside of this like whole circle of what I call attraction. Like my full attraction has, like your body, your mind, our emotional connections, our jokes, inside humor and all that stuff. All that plays into this big pie of, am I attracted to you? And so for someone to say I'm fulfilled, like as you feel that way, without having that, which for most people is like, it's like more than 180 degrees part of that pie. It's like huge. So can you explain how, without a sexual attraction, being like, hey, my wife is hot, like you can't, you don't feel that physically. How do you say that you're fulfilled, I guess?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of the confusion, like when I say that, um, why there's kind of this reaction, or this disbelief from some people, is because our culture is, like you said, so focused on the sexual component of it.
Yeah.
In in modern culture, typically what happens is it starts with a sexual connection, and then from that, maybe an emotional relationship will come out of that. But there's usually the sexual comes very early on in the relationship. And for Amanda and I, it was very much the reverse. Our emotional connection and um, our friendship and kind of like a more holistic relationship happened before the sexual component entered into our relationship. And so it was very much the reverse, which I mean, obviously should be, as far as God is concerned, is sexual relations happen after marriage, once that emotional connection has already been established. So I think there's that kind of misunderstanding. But in our specific relationship, I just believe that there are so many other aspects of a relationship that serve to fulfill our, fulfill the relationship.
Hmm.
But at the same time, we do, in like a fairly traditional sense, feel fulfilled sexually. Um, and when people hear that, obviously they say, well, then you're bisexual. But the reason I don't believe that's true is because, like I said earlier, without my
Exclusively gay.
religious, without my religious understanding, I would 10 times out of 10, I would
Yeah,
pursue men. And so it's not something I fully understand. I'm willing to recognize that. Um, but something that we experience. And so
yeah,
I've tried to explain it the best way that I know how, and fail a lot of the time, but it's something that we are both happy and yeah, have our struggles, but we're fulfilled.
that's good. Okay, well, I guess that for many that haven't walked your path, like, and I mean, everyone's experience is different. Obviously, we're all in our own minds, and it's hard for us to like really understand each other. But hopefully, your message is heard and understood by someone out there who maybe has been told, you know, my I'm not a gay man. I'm not an, I don't experience this, and I haven't ever questioned my gender. Okay, so it's hard for me to speak about this, but one of the things that really I struggle with is that when a young person in our church or in any conservative religion like ours is confronted with this pressure, like they may not even feel attracted to the same sex as a young person, um, and they just feel this pressure, like, hey, it's culturally poisonous for me not to identify as like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old kid. Like, either I am LGBT, I'm questioning at least, or if I can't, comfortably do that, I have to be an ally, right? And fully affirm everyone out there for questioning. And so, like, I struggle with that because your story is the antithesis of this, and your voice is like an alternative. Like it's unheard of today, to have your story. It's like a bright light in the sky, like, hey, listen to me as well. So any response to that, like, messages maybe for a family or for a young person maybe that hears about you, that maybe doesn't know how to read yet in their life and doesn't know how to read a book like yours, but like maybe a parent could say, hey, here's an example of, and like also, like, can you speak to them and also say, like, are you going to say, like, you need to plan on me happening in your life, like this is the same path that you can get, or how would you address that? Like, because people will say that's weaponizing your journey, like where a young person that say, well, you're gonna be able to turn out like Skylar, it's fine, and then but maybe they don't. And so maybe you can like deal with that nuance for a few minutes. And it's a hard question, but do you kind of get what I'm saying? Like, how can you address that with the youth, and then also like not have your story be like a weapon? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's honestly a big question, and what I tried to answer in my book. I picked the title "Exclude Not Thyself," mainly because that is, like, if I could sum up the insight, inspiration that I've received, the personal inspiration that I've received from God, it would be to not exclude myself from the blessings and covenants associated with the gospel because of my situation. Um, Obviously, there are some nuances there. That is kind of the principle, and that principle is true regardless of the different exceptions or different scenarios in life that exist, such as same-sex attraction. So there are different things that I have experienced that straight members of the church will not, but the principle that faith in Jesus Christ and repentance, the gospel, applies to me just as much as any other member. That principle is true. Um, it's hard to be someone in my situation without being viewed as kind of like a quote unquote poster boy, or I kind of receive that
Yeah.
from both sides. Like sometimes it's a positive thing. People say like, you're such a good example,
Yeah.
um, and I appreciate that. But then it also comes from the other side where it's a criticism. You're a poster boy and you're trying to force your path onto other people.
Right.
In my situation, what I am doing is what we're called to do as disciples of Jesus Christ, which is to invite. Um, I feel that I've been really blessed to have a testimony. I've struggled with my faith, of course, like anyone else, but never had significant doubts that I've wrestled with. And I attribute that to my support system, a lot of different factors that, I mean, I go into in my book, but I just have experienced this, and I feel like Preach My Gospel says, the more you understand the gospel, the more you want to share it with others.
Mm.
And so that's what I'm doing. I mean, I feel blessed to be a member of the Restored Church, and I believe that anyone would be better off abiding by the principles in the gospel and making and keeping covenants with God. I try to see people as individuals and recognize where they're coming from. I don't hold people who have not made covenants with God to the same standard that I held myself to, because I have more understanding. So I try to see nuance there, but my invitation is always that regardless of your situation, I would invite you to make and keep covenants with God, and to the best of your ability, have faith in Him and His church.
Okay. So, so making covenants, like pursuing would you say mixed orientation marriage? Would you say that's something that you would invite youth who experience same-sex attraction to do? Like, is that something you feel like you could encourage people to try? Or, just generally, or are you saying just like based on your circumstance, if you feel guided to do that or committed to that you should try? Or how do you navigate that? Because that's one of the things we get beat up for is, there's lots of people who do try to enter into a mixed orientation marriage, and then it's a catastrophic failure. So
Mm-hmm.
how are you able to invite someone to do that? Because it's the next step is a ceiling. Like you can say, follow the covenant path, but the ceiling is the capstone. It's the ultimate thing. And so are you encouraging people to pursue that as well? Or what are you saying?
What I usually say is that I would be very careful about getting your foot out of the door of um, entering a temple marriage as a gay Latter-day Saint, because once you do so, I think not as many opportunities may arise, or it's really difficult to go, put your foot back into that door. So I would be careful about taking it completely off the table. But like any marriage, it is something that you should go into truthfully with all of the expectations, or all of your expectations laid out on the table, all of your fears. Have these discussions with your significant other, your spouse or your future spouse.
Mhm.
It needs to go into with a high level of understanding and trust, because like you said, there have been a lot of very public examples of mixed orientation marriages failing and being very destructive, especially when children are involved. It's always a messy thing. But yeah, that's what I would say. I want to say that, like, everyone in every situation, yes, you should pursue a temple marriage. But I know that there are circumstances where people just don't have the opportunity, whatever it may be. And I think we can uphold the ideal of a temple marriage, while recognizing that not everyone will reach the ideal. And at some point, I don't know how, all of the blessings of the gospel will be made up to them and afforded to them, if they're faithful. And so there's that amount of hope. But yeah, it's go into if you have the desire, I think it's an admirable thing to pursue if you're honest with yourself and your spouse. And yeah, don't go into it with false expectations or wanting to, like, quote unquote, um, solve your same-sex attraction or heal it or get rid of it, because that's not why you enter marriage, and it most likely won't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. A plug for Lisa Diamond, Dr. Lisa Diamond's research on YouTube and publications you can probably find if you have access to that sort of thing, like academic research. But you mentioned this is, possibility for people is some fluidity in their sexual attraction. So as if there's a youth, 12, 13-year-old that you're responsible for as your child, or someone maybe in a youth program who's confided in you, knowing the data is important. So the data basically is, from my understanding of it, is that most people, men and women, who experience some level of same-sex attraction early on in life do experience some fluidity. So sounds like you're not in that majority, but it's surprising. The numbers are surprising to people, say, because you hear, well, if you ever feel like you're gay as a 13-year-old kid, you're going to be gay forever, like fully gay, exclusively gay. Like as soon as you feel that feeling, it's like, oh, I'm gay, no matter what. And that's not what the research shows. So fluidity is something that parents should know about. So a little quick plug for that. And I know we have to go here in a minute because you've got your other appointment, but any final thoughts before we end the recording? Maybe we can do a follow-up at some point when we're not too busy. Any final thoughts from you, Skyler?
I mean, yeah, no, my final advice is usually the spiel I gave earlier about not to exclude yourself from the blessings of the gospel, no matter what situation you're in. So I kind of gave my typical spiel early on, but yeah, I would just say that to the best of your ability, you are a product of your environment, and so find positive influences in your life, in your circles, online and in person, that will point you to Christ. Don't isolate yourself from all other opinions and things like that, but the majority of your environment should match what your goals are and should point you toward what you want out of life. And so I guess that would be my final piece of advice to anyone, but particularly in this situation, to people who experience same-sex attraction or have some sort of incongruence, gender-wise or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's great. Solid advice. Thank you, Skyler. Well, thanks everybody. We'll end this interview and we'll hopefully have a part 2 at some point down the road. See ya.